You're listening to Every Day's a Saturday USMC Veteran Podcast.
Now introducing your host of Every Day's a Saturday USMC Veteran, the one-man show, Brian Roof.
What's going on, friends and fam? Thank you guys so much for tuning into Every Day's a Saturday USMC Veteran. Hey guys, we got another great day, another great episode. We're going to be talking about John Allen Muhammad. He was born December 31st, 1960. He was an American convicted spree killer who, along with his partner and accomplice, Lee Boyd Malvo, then age 17, carried out the DC sniper attacks of October 2002, killing 17 people. Muhammad and Malvo were arrested in connection with the attacks on October 24th, 2002, following tips from alert citizens. All right, so guys, this is another episode, and this one I'm a little bit more familiar with. I remember this growing up. I was in high school around the time that this had gone down. I do remember this being very, big time headline news at the time when I was in high school. So we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about John Allen Muhammad. And, it's kind of through all these episodes that I've done so far, I don't think anybody's really had a known accomplice that actually got caught. And not only did he have an accomplice? His accomplice is like a young kid at the time. The kid was around 17 years old, I believe, once they started doing the crime. But let's go ahead and get right into this, and we're going to go ahead and learn about his early years. John Allen Muhammad was born John Allen Williams in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to Ernest and Eva Williams. John and his family moved to New Orleans when his mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She died when he was 3 years old. His father left the family soon afterward, leaving John to be raised mainly by his maternal grandmother and aunt. In 1987, at the age of 26, Williams joined Nation of Islam and subsequently helped provide security for the Million Man March in 1995. Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan has publicly distanced himself and his organization from the DC sniper attacks. In 1999, Williams kidnapped his children and took them to Antigua, apparently engaging in a credit card and immigration document fraud. It was during this time that he became close with Lee Boyd Malvo, a Jamaican child who later acted as his partner in the killings. Williams changed his name to John Allen Muhammad in October 2001. After his arrest, authorities also claimed that Muhammad admitted that he admired and modeled himself after Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and approved of the September 11 attacks. Malvo testified that Muhammad had indoctrinated him into believing that proceeds of an extortion attempt would be used to establish a camp in Canada where homeless children would be trained as terrorists. Muhammad was twice divorced. His second ex-wife, Mildred Muhammad, sought and was granted a restraining order alleging abuse. Muhammad was arrested on federal charges of violating the restraining order by possessing a weapon. Under federal law, those with restraining orders are prohibited from purchasing or possessing a gun. Defense attorneys in the Malvo trial and prosecutors in Muhammad's trial argued that the ultimate goal of the Beltway sniper murders was to kill Mildred in order to regain custody. All right, so there wasn't a lot of research like about his earlier years that I was able to dig up on him. But through what I was able to find, you could see that he had some trouble with his marriages, and that kind of, he kidnapped his kids, took off with them and everything. That obviously played a little bit of a mind fuck for him and all that, and got him to where he probably had a little bit of a vengeance and just was very mad at the world. Because when you go back and you look at the crimes that he committed, there's absolutely zero sense in what he did. A lot of the people that he had chosen were just random folks just walking around. They didn't care whether they were children, male, female, black, white. It didn't matter. They were just, if you were pretty much in the wrong place at the wrong time, I would say, back when this started happening. But let's go ahead and get into his military years. In August 1978, Muhammad enlisted in the Louisiana Army National Guard at Baton Rouge as a combat engineer. He transferred to the regular Army on November 6, 1985, and was trained as a mechanic, truck driver, and specialist metalworker. He qualified with the Army's standard rifle, the M16, earning the Expert Rifleman's Badge. This is the Army's highest of 3 levels of basic rifleman marksmanship for a soldier. Muhammad's first tour was the 15th Engineer Battalion at Fort Lewis in 1985. In 1991, he served in the Gulf War with a company that dismantled Iraqi chemical warfare rockets, earning several medals. In 1992, he was at Fort Ord, California with the 13th Engineers, and in 1993 was back at Fort Lewis with the 14th Engineer Battalion. Muhammad was honorably discharged from the Army with the rank of sergeant. On April 24, 1994, after 16 years of service, he received the following awards: Army Service Ribbon, National Defense Service Medal, Overseas Ribbon, Non-Commissioned Officers Professional Development Ribbon, and Army Achievement Medal. All right, so he did have a very good military career, obviously getting out with honorable discharge. And as you can see, he got his ribbons, awards, and stuff like that. So, um, and maybe him going over to Desert Storm also had a little bit of to play on his mental health and PTSD, all those types of things. I know that back then, especially, even back then, that probably really wasn't talked about much, because even when I was in the military in the early 2000s, when I got out in 2004, I had no clue what PTSD was whatsoever until I started myself having issues and started experiencing things and then talking to others. And then we started realizing what it was. But it was still, to me at that time, very new. Obviously, people in the world, all over the world, you don't have to be in combat or anything to have PTSD. But just going back to, in terms of his military service, he had a good military career, was a good shooter. And what's ironically, crazy about that, in terms of the sniper attacks, it's said that he wasn't the shooter, he was more of the driver, and the kid Malvo was actually the shooter. Um, so it wasn't really, I guess, him pulling the trigger. But then again, that is the story that obviously was portrayed. All right, we're going to go ahead and start talking more about the sniper attacks themselves. Here we go with the sniper attacks. Police followed a lead in which Muhammad or Malvo left a note at one of the shootings to tell the police to investigate a liquor store robbery murder that had occurred in Montgomery, Alabama. Investigators responding to that crime scene found one of the suspects had dropped a magazine with his fingerprints on it. These were subsequently identified as belonging to Malvo, whose prints were on file with the INS, and who was known to associate with Muhammad. They had lived together for around a year in Tacoma, Washington, where Malvo used the alias John Lee Malvo. Muhammad's identification led to the discovery that he had purchased a former police car, a blue Chevy Capri, in New Jersey on September 11, 2002. A lookout broadcast to the public on that vehicle resulted in the arrest of Muhammad and Malvo when the car was spotted parked at an Interstate 70 rest stop in Myersville, Maryland. All right. So as you can see, we're going to kind of just keep going into some of these other videos once we get past this. But as I was saying, when it came to who they were seeking out, it really wasn't anybody in particular. And at least that they never expressed that. It was more or less they were in a spot, they were at a place, and I guess they were able to take, seeing that they were able to take a shot. Maybe there was no cops around. Um, but also the crazy thing is that they may have committed more than what is on record. There's things that there's possibilities that they did shootings in other states like California, Oregon, a lot on the West Coast. Where they get caught is on the East Coast. Now we're going to go ahead and start talking about the criminal case and what started happening with them and um, with the criminal.
On October 24th, 2002, Muhammad was captured in Maryland, where most of the attacks and murders took place. Although Maryland sought to bring him to trial, United States Attorney General John Ashcroft reassigned the case to the jurisdiction of Paul Ebert, the Commonwealth Attorney for Prince William County, Virginia. Virginia was viewed as more likely to impose a death sentence, which was borne out by the Virginia and Maryland verdicts. Virginia also allowed the death penalty for juveniles. In October 2003, Muhammad went on trial for the murder of Dean Myers. The crime had occurred in Prince William County, a small city in Virginia. The trial had been moved from Prince William County to Virginia Beach, approximately 200 miles away. Muhammad was granted the right to represent himself in the defense and dismissed his legal counsel, though he immediately switched back to having a legal representation after his opening argument. He was charged with the murder, terrorism, conspiracy, and the legal use of a firearm and faced possible death sentence. Prosecutors said the shootings were part of a plot to extort $10 million from local and state governments. The prosecution said that they would make the case for 16 shootings allegedly involving Muhammad. The terrorism charge against Muhammad required prosecutors to prove he committed at least 2 shootings in a 3-year period.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and keep on going with the criminal court case.
The prosecution called more than 130 witnesses and introduced more than 400 pieces of evidence intended to prove that Muhammad undertook the murders and ordered Malvo to help carry it out. Evidence included a rifle found in Muhammad's car that was linked by ballistic tests to 8 of the 10 killings in the Washington area and 2 others in Louisiana and Alabama. The car, which was modified so that the sniper could shoot from inside the trunk, and a laptop and computer was also found in the car that contained maps with icons pinpointing shooting scenes. Witnesses' accounts put Muhammad across the street from one shooting and his car near the scene of several others. There was also a recorded phone call to police hotline in which a man, his voice identified by a detective as Muhammad's, demand money in exchange for stopping the shootings. Muhammad's defense asked the court to drop the capital murder charges because there was no direct evidence. Malvo's fingerprints were on the Bushmaster rifle found in Muhammad's car, and DNA from Muhammad was discovered on the rifle. But the defense contended that Muhammad could not be put to death under Virginia's triggerman law unless he actually pulled the trigger to kill Myers, and nobody testified they saw him do so. On November 17, 2003, Muhammad was convicted of all 4 counts in his indictment against him: capital murder for the shooting of Myers, capital murder under Virginia's anti-terrorism statute for homicide committed with an intent to terrorize the government or the public at large, conspiracy to commit murder, and the illegal use of a firearm. In the penalty phase of the trial, the jury, after 5 hours of deliberation over 2 days, anonymously recommended that Muhammad be sentenced to death. On March 9, 2004, a Virginia judge agreed with the jury's recommendation and he was sentenced to death.
Okay, so obviously he got sentenced to death. Malvo, being juvenile at the time, did not receive death. I do believe he will be doing life in prison. I think he does get a possibility of parole. Didn't do much following up on the Malvo portion. But before we get into the part 3 of the criminal case part, they really went to an extensive amount by modifying a car. I mean, I went and watched a video about this. They literally took out the back seat in such a way that they were able to lift up the back seat, and and if they were ever to get pulled over, they were able to put everything back and make it look as though it was, not disturbed. While they would go and do these shootings, um, John Allen Muhammad would grab and take the seat and lift it up as Malvo was going underneath and getting into the trunk. And then they had a little peepholes where obviously he was able to look down his sight and have the barrel out in such a way that no one around could even see what was going on. So they really had to put a lot of extensive thought into this. And once again, we never got to understand what was, the main um, driving force for John Allen Muhammad to basically even take on a young child too, who had his whole life ahead of him, and get him to create these crazy crimes along with him. So he just obviously hit Malvo at a good time, and not in a good time, in a bad time in Malvo's life, where it was a good time for him to basically manipulate him and make him think that, doing these things was a good thing, and especially to random innocent people at that. So all right, we're going to go ahead and finish it up with the criminal court case. This is part 3.
On April 22nd, 2005, the Virginia Supreme Court affirmed his death penalty, stating that Muhammad could be sentenced to death because the murder was part of an act of terrorism. The court also rejected an argument by defense lawyers that he could not be sentenced to death because he was not the triggerman in the killings. Virginia Supreme Court Justice Donald W. Lemons said at the time, with calculation, extensive planning, premeditation, and ruthless disregard for life, Muhammad carried out this cruel scheme of terror. In 2005, Maryland and Virginia reached an agreement to allow his extradition to face Maryland charges. He was held at the maximum security Sussex State Prison near Waverly, Sussex County, Virginia, which houses Virginia's male death row inmates. In August 2005, while awaiting execution in Virginia, he was extradited to Montgomery County, Maryland, to face charges there. On May 30th, 2006, a Maryland jury found Muhammad guilty of 6 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. On June 1st, 2006, neither Alabama, Arizona, Louisiana, nor Washington State moved to try Muhammad, given his death sentence for murder in Virginia in 2006. Malvo confessed that the pair also killed 14 victims in California, Arizona, and Texas. An appeal filed by Muhammad's defense lawyers in April 2008 cited evidence of brain damage that would render Muhammad incompetent to make legal decisions, and that he should not have been allowed to represent himself at his Virginia trial. On September 16, 2009, Prince William County Circuit Court Judge Mary Grace O'Brien set Muhammad's execution date for November 10, 2009. There was a petition filed for his death sentence, but was ultimately denied.
So they tried to stop him from being executed. None of the states, obviously everybody wanted him to be executed. That's why they wanted to make sure that the trial ended where it did, to ensure that he received a death penalty, because some of the states did not do the death penalty in such a way. And honestly, they moved pretty quickly with the death penalty phase. Usually people sit on death row for quite some time. So they went to execute him pretty quick. So here we go with the execution portion. And then right after that, we're going to go ahead and play a little bit of a news clipping about, them talking about the execution and all the, things related to the case itself. Here we go with the execution.
On November 10th, 2009, hours before Muhammad's scheduled execution, pleas for clemency made by his attorneys were denied by Virginia Governor Tim Kaine. Under Virginia law, at the time, a defendant convicted of capital murder was allowed to choose the method by which he or she will be put to death, either lethal injection or electrocution. As Muhammad declined to select a method, by law, the method of lethal injection was selected for him. He was offered a selection of a last meal, which he accepted. Muhammad's last meal consisted of chicken, red sauce, and cake. Muhammad declined to make a final statement, and his execution began at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Greensville Correctional Center, Greensville County, near Jarratt, Virginia. The lethal injection process began at 9:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Muhammad was pronounced dead at 9:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Muhammad's body was cremated and the ashes given to his son
All right. So they did try to, like I said, stop the execution from happening. They were denied, and the execution was carried out successfully. We're going to go ahead and watch a clip, basically from that night of the execution, I believe, or if not, the next day. But we're going to go ahead and watch the news. This is done by ABC News, and let's play it. Here we go.
Many of us have heard the term dead man walking. Yesterday, before he was executed, DC sniper John Muhammad came to fully understand what that term truly means.
The execution of John Allen Muhammad has been carried out under the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Just after 9 p.m., 7 years and 12 days after he was captured and charged with orchestrating a cold-blooded shooting spree, John Muhammad was put to death by the state.
He seemed very unemotional.
Family members of Muhammad had slipped in to see him earlier in the afternoon. But there would be no final reprieve, no mercy for the man who had shown no mercy, whose rifle seemed to target Americana itself. 10 people killed as they did the things that are part of everyday life. A child shot at middle school, shoppers gunned down at the grocery store, while they mowed the lawn, while they pumped their gas. Virginia's protocol for the death penalty is mandated precise clockwork. The last meal had to be served no later than 4 hours prior to execution. There was the offer of a shower 2 hours before capital punishment was imposed. Muhammad was brought into the death chamber just before the appointed hour.
6 corrections officers had strapped him down, and you could see Muhammad kind of clench his fist a few times.
The curtains closed as IV lines were inserted. The curtains reopened. No words of remorse. Muhammad had nothing to say. A corrections official gave the order for execution. Time of death, 9:11 p.m. Virginia's version of justice had been carried out. Muhammad was the 340th person executed in the state since 1908.
So, from the time they go ahead and, push that down, it is about, 8-minute process, and it was over. So he got the death penalty at the end. Malvo is currently serving time in prison, and I don't think that he'll ever see the light of day as well. But it's a sad situation altogether. It's sad for the fact that we have a lot of veterans out there with mental health issues, and we don't have a lot, especially in the earlier days. There was not a lot of things out there to help veterans with PTSD and a lot of issues they were going through. And how I know that is because I served a lot later, and I still had a lot of struggles myself. Are they getting better with things? Absolutely. But there's still a need out there to get, some of these people need help. And then the other sad story is that we had a young child that was, around 16, 17 years old when he comes across John Allen Muhammad, and he's at a very early age and where he's easy to manipulate and easy to, to do things for. I mean, obviously, John Allen Muhammad got him to pull a trigger, and he took him out, to the shooting range, taught him how to shoot and become an expert, on the rifle. And it's just a sad situation that a guy, right, like, at 16, 17 years old ends his life. And by the way of someone who he thought was his mentor and someone he could look up to, but ultimately he got him and put him down the wrong path. All right, well, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this episode, guys. Hey, I appreciate you guys. I hope you guys bear with me a little bit on this new format that we're doing. I went ahead and did a little bit of some research, seeing that, you got to shorten things up a little bit, try to get right into the content. So I hope you guys are liking it. If not, let me know. My email is right there down below. You guys can email me if you guys like the show, don't like the show. If you got some kind of, good advice, constructive criticism, I'm always for it. Let me know if there's something I could do better. Maybe there's something out there that you would love me to cover, or a series out there you'd love me to do. Hey, I'm always open for it. And if maybe you want to be a guest on the show, go ahead and give me an email. But hey, I hope you guys are all having an amazing day out there. And remember, don't let it kick your ass. Make sure you're out there kicking it. Until next time.